Hi class, I put together a quick presentation for you for the PowerPoint project that's coming up, and I'd like to share with you PowerPoint tips and tricks to help you get the highest grade possible. Okay, so let's look at tip number one, be concise. So use bullet point format. Typically a good bullet point format would be maybe 4 or 5 bullet points per slide. It just depends. Sometimes people might do 2 or 3, and it's also very effective. It really just depends on what you're trying to communicate. Um, Short sentences, so as opposed to using long ones. Okay, so I know some of us, like I was a big, run-on person, so 80 words per bullet point might not be a good idea. It might be good to keep it in a good length. No paragraphs, so try not to put paragraphs on your PowerPoint slides. The bullet point format is the best format. And communicate effectively. Make sure that what your point is, right? That you're making your point, and that you're using enough bullet points to get that point across. And so I wanted to give you an example for the first tip, and the above example that I pulled from a student's presentation from last semester is very concise. It has 3 bullet points, good length sentences, and it has a great title. All right, tip number 2, paraphrase. So try to rework source information into your own words. That's what paraphrasing is, okay? And when you take source information, you have to make sure that you give credit where credit is due, and that's what you do in the very last slide of this presentation. You're going to add a works cited, okay? And you're going to add all your like resources that you used for the presentation. Quotation usage. Some students ask me, well, can I just use the information and just put quotations around it? I just want to remind you, quotes should be used sparingly. Most of the content should be in your own words. However, if you want to add maybe 1 or 2 quotes throughout the PowerPoint, because they're very powerful, or because they communicate your point more effectively, that's okay with me. And the last point here is the resource. So I have a resource for you. If you don't know what paraphrasing is, or if you don't know how to cite properly, you can go to the OWL Purdue. And if you type that into your Google search bar, you can either do the OWL Purdue Paraphrase or OWL Purdue Citations, and it'll come up. Okay? Tip number 3, add relevant images. All right, so you want to add pictures to your presentation because it draws the viewer in. And you also want to add any charts, graphs, or relevant graphics that will help you communicate the data. And you want to format your images. You don't want to just put an image into your slide and not center it, or not justify it left, justify it right. Make sure that it looks good, and if it needs to be flipped or if it needs to be resized, make sure that you get that done. Here's an example of a student that added a graph for a bar chart for their family's presentation. And sometimes when you're adding infographics, you want to make sure that they're large enough to where the person can see, right? If you're making a presentation in a class, you want to make sure it's large enough. So sometimes these graphs need to be put into their own slide. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're large enough to where you can see them. But remember, if you have like large charts like these that you need to take up their own slide, don't forget to like add more slides at the end, to make sure that you're covering the material. And then here are some miscellaneous tips. Add relevant titles. Okay, make sure that the title matches the content of your slide. Add a slide for conflict theory. Add a slide for functional theory. And make sure that you use colors that are readable. That if you use a light background, use a dark font. If you use a dark background, use a light font, so that people can view your presentation and they can read it easily. I wouldn't recommend using like a neon font. Like, those are very hard to read. Okay, and last tip, just make sure that you stay within the 15 slide slide limit. Okay, so I think you can do an effective presentation in 15 slides, okay? Around 12 to 15 slides is perfect. Anyhow, good luck with your presentation. I appreciate all the hard work that you folks have been doing, and I wish you nothing but the best. Goodbye.